This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law. Welcome to Lawline with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now, we introduce our guests and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. In his goal to rid the Fulton Fish Market of mafia influence, Mayor Giuliani replaced the 6 companies that had been unloading fish for decades, even though none of its owners have ever been charged with being members of organized crime. Today we'll speak with Gerald McMahon, the attorney representing the Ousted Unloaders Association, and his client, Gennaro Provenzano, president of the Fulton Fish Unloaders Association. Gennaro Provenzano's family has been unloading fish at the market for almost 60 years. Hello, Jerry.
Hello, Alan.
Hello, Gennaro.
Good morning, sir.
Now, Gennaro, tell me, you've been president of the association. First of all, you've been in the market for how many years?
Oh, roughly 30 years, 35 years.
Okay. Now, Mayor Giuliani is saying that the unloaders, your organization, are organized crime. How do you respond to that?
I'm not. I don't know. I don't think any of the members of the association are. We're hardworking people. We earned our living breaking our backs on loading trucks in all kinds of weather, all kinds of circumstances.
Can I ask you this? For years I've heard rumors about organized crime, the mafia involved in the Fulton Fish Market. Have you ever seen it?
Have I? No.
Jerry, now you're the attorney. You've been involved in the market. Have you ever seen organized crime in the market?
Yes, I've seen organized crime, but they've all been wearing city uniforms. Politicians for 50 years have been making a living screaming organized crime in the Fulton Fish Market. It's an easy target because the people there have Italian last names. And if a politician gets up in front of a camera and says organized crime in the Fulton Fish Market, you automatically have 50 reporters and TV cameras in the courtroom. It's guaranteed publicity, and they stand up there and they say it. And I would ask you this. If there were organized crime in the Fulton Fish Market since the 1920s, which is what they claim, how is it possible that Mayor Giuliani has spent millions of dollars when he was the United States Attorney, and administrations of the city, mayors and police officers, have spent millions of dollars, untold amounts of time and personnel, and nothing ever changes? And that would lead me to conclude one of two things. Either it's not what they say it is, or these people are totally incompetent. Now, I certainly don't want to accuse Mr. Giuliani of being incompetent, at least not totally.
Mayor Giuliani.
Mayor Giuliani, former U.S. Attorney, but still prosecutor Giuliani. There is not organized crime in the Fulton Fish Market. It has nothing to do with the business of the fish market. And all I can tell you is that politicians make a living out of saying that.
Gennaro, recently there was a major fire at the market, and it was right before some records were going to be looked over by the authorities. Now, it was rumored by the authorities that this was arson. Do you have any information as to that?
Information, no. Opinion, yes.
What's your opinion?
I think that Nero burning Rome was about the same to what happened with the Fulton Fish Market. The only people that had anything to gain was Mr. Giuliani and Mr. Mastro. They needed something to spearhead this law that they had passed.
Now, Mastro being the deputy mayor.
Right?
Chief of staff. He is Mr. Giuliani's chief of staff. But he was also the prosecutor responsible for the Fulton Fish Market initiative when Mr. Giuliani was the United States Attorney. Alan, the fire was a very pivotal event for the people in the market. When the mayor announced the initiative to regulate the market in February, he had to go to the city council to get legislation. That legislation was being stalled. And when, at the end of March, I think it was March 30th was the fire, it would be fair to say that there were a number of people in the city council who were concerned with the civil liberties and the civil rights aspects of the legislation. That fire occurred in late morning. I could see it practically from my own office on Wall Street. While the fire was still raging, You had council member Catherine Freed, you had council member Ken Fisher from Brooklyn, and you had, I think Mr. Giuliani himself went down and stood in front of the fire and said, the gangsters did it. The people that I want to throw out of the market did it. And that was in the end of March and April. Nobody has been charged. They haven't even proved that it was an arson. But they did get the legislation that went through the city council lickety-split after that fire, and nobody, forget about my clients, nobody has been charged with an arson. And that line about records to be inspected, there were no records to be inspected after that. And the only people that got hurt by that fire were the people who are sitting at this table, Mr. Provenzano and the other unloaders. And I'll tell you one other thing. There's a cartoon circulating in the market which has a picture of Mr. Giuliani and Mr. Mastro. And Mr. Mastro has a gas can in his hand, and they're talking about the fire in the market. The people who gained the most from that fire are the people in City Hall. The people in the market were devastated by that fire.
Are you trying to make us believe that the administration has orchestrated a myth here, that organized crime is not infiltrated in the market, that this is all just for political reasons?
I am telling you that 95% of what you read about is myth. There are criminals in the Fulton Fish Market who gamble, but there are criminals on Wall Street who gamble. There are criminals in the Fulton Fish Market who lend money to people who can't get money from a bank. But if you go to Hunts Point, or you go to the Javits Center, or you go to 42nd Street, you will find the same sort of crime, but it doesn't get treated the same way because you don't get sexy camera coverage like you do when you say Fulton Fish Market.
Jerry, it's been reported that the Fulton Fish Market is actually controlled by a particular mafia family.
Right.
I'm sure you've heard the same thing.
Right.
How do you respond to that?
How come they didn't indict this guy? Jerry Provenzano is affiliated with the Boy Scouts. One of the other 6 unloaders, Robert Fox, when they issued a license, the decision throwing out these 6 people and bringing in this new company, the commissioner, Rudy Washington is his name, in a 17-page decision, presumably after a little investigation, says that Robert Fox has 2 felony convictions for criminal possession of a weapon and criminal possession of stolen property, which would fit very nicely with their theory of the Fulton Fish Market. The truth is that Robert Fox, the unloader, my client, has never been arrested in his life.
Let me ask you this.
Wait a minute, Alan, let me ask you this. How would you like to be accused in a written document published by the city of being a felon, having a record, 2-time felony conviction, and that's part of the reason why I'm going to take your job away, and you've never been arrested?
Take your business away.
That's all, just like that.
But wasn't it just a number of years ago, in response to a federal lawsuit, a federal judge actually appointed a receiver for the market?
We agreed to that. There was a consent judgment. The government claimed that these guys were all organized criminals and they should be thrown out immediately.
That was the federal government.
Yes,
That's
with
not-
Mr. Giuliani. That was his lawsuit.
I understand, but that's the federal government.
Right. And we agreed to have an administrator appointed. They paid for it, not us. And he spent $5 million from 1988 to 1994. And the best that he could come up with was a situation where these guys were committing an antitrust violation. Now,
Meaning price fixing?
yeah, that's what he was saying. Price fixing. Now, what happened to organized crime and racketeering? I didn't realize that the mayor of the city of New York was so concerned. But price fixing, which of course is not true. If you have the amount of money that they're making down there is what controls the prices, not these 6 people agreeing. But that was it. That's the only blemish in 50 years of investigations, is that these unloaders agreed among themselves on prices. An antitrust violation, not an organized crime violation.
On the day that the unloaders were literally unlicensed and refused, I believe you were kept out of the market by police.
Yes.
The market was closed for that day. I know certainly the market, it was reported that the unloaders certainly had a responsibility or part responsibility in closing the market that day through picketing or whatever. Mayor Giuliani said if the market would have been closed one more day, he would have literally closed a $1 billion Fulton Fish Market for all time. Mm-hmm. How do you respond to that?
Reckless. And he would have done it. I received a call, actually it was Sunday night. On Friday afternoon, Friday the 13th of October, they came down with the 17-page decision and said, these guys are out, Laro is in, starting Sunday night, which is when the market opens up again. Sunday night, the market, as you said, shut down. Not because they did anything. We were behind barricades. There were 700 police officers there. 700! Nobody got arrested. The market erupted. It shut down. The police ran out of the market. The new unloaders ran out of the market, leaving pallets of fish all over the place. That afternoon, I went home and got some sleep. I had been in the market all night. I got a telephone call about 2 o'clock in the afternoon from Mr. Mastro, the chief of staff. He screamed at me on the telephone, if this market is disrupted tonight, I'm telling you, Jerry, we will close the entire place down, and you know we are a no-nonsense crew here at City Hall. I said, very good. And he would have closed it down. They don't care. They don't care about $1 billion a year industry. They don't care. What they do care about is their perception that they're bad. Let the facts, forget the facts. Forget the industry, forget what's good for the city, forget that Central Park you can't even walk into. He has 700 police officers down in Lower Manhattan where there is no crime, and yet you walk into Central Park, which is a crown jewel of the city, and you're lucky if you don't get raped, robbed, or murdered.
Gennaro, how do you defend these accusations that the city government is, the mayor's office is making against the unloaders, that they're a part of organized crime? How do you defend it?
I define it by saying that there's nobody that controls me. I'm an independent person. My company was independent. Nobody tells me what to do or when to do it. I didn't never follow the directions of a market manager because my business was to service the Fulton Fish Market.
And your customers.
Right. A market manager telling me what to do, inevitably he controls the market. He controls the whole market by saying what time I can unload or can't unload.
Or who you unload
or
first.
Who I unload first, or who I unload to. They even restrict who they unload to. They've denied some people the right to have their freight unloaded because they didn't like who was being delivered to. And 2 weeks in a row, I believe the truck did not get unloaded. It's not a good business to do that. They're a city. They're supposed to regulate. They're not supposed to run. They're telling you who to hire, who to fire. They replaced 6 companies, calling us a cartel, calling us a monopoly, calling us whatever they wanted to call us, and got away with calling us these things, and they put one company in.
Laro.
No competition. One
competition.
price.
They have one company that the city is helping them distribute their bills and collect their money. The customers are being told you can't question the bill, you can't cut the bill, you have to pay the amount that you're billed, and that's it. Everybody's human, everybody makes mistakes. If I made a mistake on my billing, somebody came over to me and says, hey, you charged me for 14,000 pounds, I only got 1,400. We would correct it right then and there, subtract the amount and say, okay, this is it, this is what you owe me, I'm sorry I made the mistake. With Laro, they have to pay it and then I think object to it.
Let me ask you, have you ever been convicted of a crime?
I have a tax evasion back in 1977, personal.
Anything to do with organized crime or anything of that nature?
Nothing to do with organized crime, nothing to do with the way I handle freight, the way I treat my customers. I had signed contracts from all the trucking companies that I serviced that they wanted me to service them, and they had the right, stated right on the contract, they had the right to break that contract with the proper notice.
How did you become an unloader?
I was born with it in my blood. My family was in the unloading business since the 1930s. And,
Over 60 years?
Over 60 years, and one of the first jobs I worked when I was 15 years old was down at the Fulton Fish Market during the summers.
And you've been doing it ever since, basically?
More or less, yeah, on and off. Since 1976 on a regular basis.
And you had your own firm?
Right.
What are you doing now?
I'm picketing. I am suing. I want my business back. I watched this Laro Maintenance Corporation, a bunch of janitors, and they don't know how to handle freight. I see them mistreat freight. It's a miracle that none of them men have gotten hurt the way they operate.
And we'll talk about Laro more right after this break. You're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Stay with us. Hello, I'm Alan Schnorman, the host of Lawline, and I want to give you some important information about your legal rights. If you were seriously injured in an automobile, a fall down, or construction accident, you may be entitled to a substantial money award for your pain and suffering. It is important to speak to a knowledgeable attorney in that field. At my firm, Solomon & Schnorman, our practice is limited to personal injury law. We fight for the rights of accident victims. Don't try to evaluate the case yourself. If you have any questions about your accident, call us at 1-800-LAWLINE. If you're too injured to come to our office, we will come to you. The consultation is free, and we only get paid when your case is settled or won. Remember, the insurance companies have lawyers protecting their interests, and so should you. Hello, you're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Today we're discussing the Fulton Fish Market and the ouster of the unloaders. Mayor Giuliani has said the unloaders are part of organized crime, and that's why he kicked them out. We have their attorney, Gerald McMahon, and we have the president of the Unloaders Association, the Fulton Fish Market, Gennaro Provenzano. Jerry, right before the break, you wanted to say something?
Yes. It's interesting. You're talking about myth versus reality. One of the things that the city does, and the mayor is very good at this, he will stand up in front of the cameras and the reporters and he will say, well, I just threw out organized crime. But in his decision issued by the commissioner, they pretend that they threw these people out strictly on business reasons, having nothing to do with character or organized crime. And the reason that they do that is because the law, as passed by the council, provided for a right to appeal if you're thrown out on character grounds. So they have the hypocrisy to say that they threw out the 6 unloaders because the new guy was cheaper and better. Yeah. But then they, right after they issued the decision, they go out in front of the reporters and say, we just threw out the gangsters out of the Fulton Fish Market. Now that's a little bit hypocritical, don't you think?
Let's talk about the company they put in, Laro.
Yes, and it's funny that you should ask about them, because Mr. Giuliani's commissioner, Mr. Washington, in his decision throwing my clients out, said, and I quote, the city uncovered no adverse information about Laro. In truth and in fact, Laro is a certified anti-union busting organization.
Where did you get that information from?
Laro was found by the National Labor Relations Board, the federal regulatory agency for all labor in America, to have engaged in unfair union practices, labor practices in Brooklyn in 1990 and 1991. And part of it, the evidence was a pattern of anti-union behavior by Robert Bertuglia, the 100% stockholder of Laro. And interestingly enough, the NLRB, when they held the hearings to determine whether they had violated federal labor law, Bertuglia testified, and the administrative law judge, as part of his decision, said his credibility is lacking.
Well, does that finding mean that they cannot be unloaders at the Fulton Fish Market?
Well, what it does show is that, incidentally, when they submitted their proposal to be the unloaders in the Fulton Fish Market, they were asked whether you were ever a subject of an administrative proceeding, and Bertuglia committed perjury, and he said under oath in the document he had never been, and Laro had never been, a party to an administrative proceeding or investigated for a violation of civil law. They have now, and you will read in the New York Times, you will read about how they have admitted that that was an incorrect, a false statement, and Mr. Mastro's comment was, well, we had a problem with the veracity of all the applicants.
Jerry, are you saying that the president of Laro committed a crime on the application?
Absolutely.
Is that what you're saying here?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And Mr. Bertuglia, here I am, come and sue me. I am saying that he committed the Class E felony of offering a false instrument for filing by submitting this proposal to the city, and he got this license, and he took my client's jobs away by submitting a false and fraudulent document.
Let's follow that through. Assuming if that is true, does that mean that this organization does not have the right
Yes.
to be the unloaders at the Fulton
That's
Fish
correct.
Market by
They-
submitting this false document?
Yes, their license should be terminated because it was obtained on fraudulent grounds.
Okay, let's just take a step back for a second. I assume your 6 companies that you represent submitted an application
Yes, they did.
along with Laro for the right to unload fish at the Fulton
That's
Fish
correct.
Market. And the city government chose Laro over the 6 companies that have been there for years.
Yes.
And the reason they said that was on business grounds.
Right.
Not the character of the
Correct.
people. Although, of course, it's certainly been reported that they're saying that the Fulton Fish Market was organized crime or
Ridden.
mafia-ridden.
And when the decision was announced, he said in front of the cameras, I just removed the organized criminals.
Mr. Provenzano, who runs the market?
Mr. Giuliani.
No, he owns the market for the city of New York. But, I mean, who manages the market? Who says what really happens?
Each individual business, as far as I know, operates on its own, makes its own decisions. One wholesaler does not tell the other wholesaler how much to sell the fish for, how much fish to order. Everybody takes their chances on ordering the amount of fish in. It's a supply and demand situation that right now the city can't control the supply and demand, which they shouldn't have a right to, but they can control the supply and demand. It's a product that has to be moved rapidly when it gets to its destination. You have to get it off the truck and onto the stand rapidly. We used to perform the work in roughly 5 hours a night. They've allotted Laro 12 hours a night to do this work.
The same work.
And at times they can't finish. On the very first night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, before there was any disruption by any walkout by anybody, there were 60 trucks waiting to be unloaded at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
They would have never finished on time.
But that's over with, right? Isn't the word market now working at least?
No.
Well, how is the market doing now?
The Sunday that just passed, they didn't finish unloading trucks till 7 o'clock in the morning. These trucks would have been unloaded by between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning with the other crews.
You know, the image that most of the public has of organized crime is men with suits in smoky rooms somewhere making decisions that affect millions of dollars. And yet, of course, I look at you as a representative of the unloaders, and you're a hard-working man, obviously.
I've worked hard all my life.
Not the image that we get in the movies or from the movies Casino or anything of that nature.
Do you know what? Talking about money, dollars underlies everything. The city admits that the gross revenues, that the total amount of money that each of the 6 companies collected per year was how much do you think? Millions of dollars? $300,000 total.
Out of $1 billion business.
Out of $1 billion. And they had to pay their employees for that. They had to pay workman's comp, insurance, their own salary, high-lows, gas. Gross revenues of $300,000 a year for each of the 6 companies. That's organized crime, that's chicken feed. Who works for that money?
And the 6 companies, how many people are we talking about?
I think it was roughly between 30 and 40 working people.
That weren't fired, that weren't allowed to work.
Right.
And how many people did they hire to replace these 30 or 40 people?
I think I've seen upwards of 60 people unloading trucks. I've seen 4 or 5 people just standing around supervising. I've seen a support vehicle down there with a computer to do billing. I don't know how many people that they're trying to cover.
Now, it's been reported that your members have been offered jobs by Laro. Is that true?
Some have. My nephew would not go to work for a company that put his uncle and his father out of business. I wouldn't go to work for them.
I mean, you have to be a trader. You have to be a trader.
You have people that, that you work for, and they were good to you. we didn't force our people to stay 12 hours, 10 hours. When the work we knew that was coming in was finished, if it was 4 hours time, you went home and you got your full day's pay. Because the next night you may have had to stay 6 hours. It was a situation where they liked working for us. I don't think that anybody would have gone to work for Laro.
Gennaro, let me just ask you this one thing, if I may. You know, the image the public has of organized crime is they're business people. They work like everything else. However, if you don't do everything exactly the way they want it to be done, they come in with a thumb and they put it on your neck. How do you respond to that?
I've never had a thumb put on my neck. I've never put my thumb on anybody's neck.
Jerry, how do you respond to that?
I enjoy watching that in the movies. I love gangster movies. Obviously, Rudy does too. But the problem is that this is not a movie down here. This is real live people who have lost jobs because of his view of the movie Fulton Fish Market. You know, it's interesting you ask who controls the market, who really controls the market. Do you know who is the single strongest element in the Fulton Fish Market today? The single strongest element in the market are the retailers who are predominantly Korean. The buyers of fish are the strongest voice in the market. So this Italian organized crime dominated Fulton Fish Market, in fact, is dominated by the Korean retailers.
In the market itself?
The business marketplace, they dominate.
Has changed within the last
It has.
10 years?
Within-
Is that what the-
absolutely, absolutely. They own the stores, the retail stores, most of the stores, and they dictate. They are the strongest voice in the market. And interestingly enough, they are a very strong constituency of the mayor. They have his ear. And, you know, unfortunately, we don't have his ear. They have his ear. But it is not an Italian organized crime dominated market at all.
If Mayor Giuliani and his chief of staff, Mr. Mastro, are watching this program, what would you say to them?
I would say to them that I respect them as formidable adversaries. I think that they should do the decent thing and get rid of the scab company that they brought in there, the company which is incompetent and which is owned by a fellow who is obviously has no respect for the truth, and return the people who can do the job best. If you think that these guys, and I told Mr. Giuliani and I told Mr. Mastro face to face, look, if Provenzano or Fox or Albanese or any of these people are gangsters, organized criminals, indict them.
What would you like to say to the mayor?
Get rid of Laro before you kill the market.
And what would you say to the mayor as to this whole thing where he's saying that the market and your people are mafia related?
Charge me with a crime and try me for it.
And you heard it here on Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Thank you very much, Gennaro Provenzano, president of the Unloaders Association, the Fulton Fish Market, and Jerry McMahon, their attorney. Thank you for being on Lawline. And
Thank
as
you,
always,
Alan.
this is Alan Schnorman. Thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law.